What is God? God is the infinite spatial existence where everything remains a conceptive reflection. God creates every formation and information, allowing dimensional space release by means of the natural symmetry. Structural content of the natural symmetry includes the potential parity of width-depth, distance-direction, dimension-frequency, time application, visual orientation, self-positioning, and mathematical proportion. God provides infinite neutrality to the natural symmetry structure in the form of absolute zero, the necessity of which allows every value to form, unform and inform an active and positional duration. The self-unit then can act, interact and synchronize the individual motion to accept or reject the possibility to form, unform and inform a positive or negative function, a componential structure, or an optional mass. The infinite neutrality, providing infinite internal-external surrounds, ensures every entity with irreversible, effective, and opposite defining relativity. The natural symmetry, consisting of the objectless light, pure energy, and the motionless sound, pure matter, equals natural understanding. Using the light-sound-light conversion, image-word-image exchange, the natural symmetry reveals being knowing, knowing doing, and being doing. Realizing the natural symmetry, human being attains neutrality, confirming the observer, the observed and the observation, the is and isn't point of identity, the being knowing, the knowing doing, and the experience of transparent self. Applying the natural symmetry, human being structures the observation, identifies the observed, relates the observer and describes the observing proportional to the image language in possession, and personal accessibility to the informative totality. Revealing the neutral point of human identity. The natural symmetry locates the knowing being and knowing doing, uniting the existence of human being and human doing into an individual self. Being knowing, knowing doing entity, respectively relating the dimensional unit of human neutrality, I, to the infinite neutral being of the existence, God. The neutral human position of I-observer enters the experiential language of being and the referential language of doing. Instantly placing the human neutral being into a split correlation of positions, and descriptive state of having natural identity, personal position, and social rendition, in understanding the dimensional awareness of being. Consciousness, the body essence of doing, conscience, and the interaction of both, the natural self. Within the natural self, every image exists as experience. Every experience exists as word. Every word exists as language. Every language exists as knowledge. Every knowledge exists as example. Every example exists as criteria. Every criterion exists as event. Every event exists as purpose. Every purpose exists as necessity. Every necessity exists as being. Every being exists as God. What is I? I reflects my being, therefore, I see that the natural image of I exists. I reflects my seeing, therefore, I see that the natural image of light exists. I reflects my word, therefore, I see that the natural image of sound exists. I reflects my speech, therefore, I see that the natural image of language exists. I reflects my language, therefore, I see that the natural image of knowledge exists. I reflects my knowledge, therefore, I see that the natural image of thinking exists. I reflects my thinking, therefore, I see that the natural image of understanding exists. I reflects my understanding, therefore, I see that the natural image of body exists. I reflects my body, therefore, I see that the natural image of biology exists. I reflects my biology, therefore, I see that the natural image of chemistry exists. I reflects my chemistry, therefore, I see that the natural image of physics exists. I reflects my physics, therefore, I see that the natural image of form exists. I reflects my form, therefore, I see that the natural image of motion exists. I reflects my motion, therefore, I see that the natural image of direction exists. I reflects my direction, therefore, I see that the natural image of distance exists. I reflects my distance, therefore, I see that the natural image of space exists. I reflects my space, therefore, I see that the natural image of time exists. I reflects my time, therefore, I see that the natural image of dimension exists. I reflects my dimension, therefore, I see that the natural image of frequency exists. I reflects my frequency, therefore, I see that the natural image of symmetry exists. I reflects my symmetry, therefore, I see that the natural image of consciousness exists. I reflects my consciousness, therefore, I see that the natural image of application exists. I reflects my application, therefore, I see that the natural image of observation exists. I reflects my observation, therefore, I see that the natural image of visual understanding exists. I reflects my visual understanding, therefore, I see that the natural image of act exists. I reflects my act, therefore, I see that the natural image of being exists. I reflects my being, therefore, I see that the natural image of reflection exists. I reflects my reflection, therefore, I am. I am, therefore, I simultaneously reflects a personal application and a natural format, the mathematical soul. Within the mathematical soul, every observation exists as information. Every information exists as application. Every application exists as entity. Every entity exists as structure. Every structure exists as number. Every number exists as function. Every function exists as set. Every set exists as reason. Every reason exists as concept. Every concept exists as conscious proportion. Every conscious proportion exists as I. What is conscious proportion? Consciousness is the infinite spatial awareness of being existent prior to becoming dimensional space. Proportion is the application present within the spatial awareness before and after becoming dimensional space. The proportion contained within the spatial awareness reflects zero overall dimensional value due to its temporal continuity and its constant neutral infinite state of balance. The proportional value of the dimensional space including time, distance, direction, dimension, frequency, symmetry, and positioning equals 1 relative to the defined internal state, while remaining at zero value reflective to the external line of application. Dimensional space, self-dividing indefinitely to form new temporal repetitions, continuously self-assembling to accommodate new formations, while maintaining the original set of instructions for every new mathematical construction. 0 is always 1, and 1 is never complete. Prior to being, 1 is always 0. After being, 1 is always separate. 1 divided is always a different 1. 1 combined is always a function. Function combined is always a set. Proportional set combined is always a system. Proportional system combined is always a unit. Unit's existence is always proportional to 0. Unit's function is always proportional to internal form. Unit's form is always proportional to external function. Unit's value is always proportional to internal-external form and function. Form and function is essential to being 1. 0 defines every form, 1 unites every function. Can I reason God? If God creates, then God must create by the act of being or not being or by the image of acting or not acting. If God creates by the act of being, what every form and all existing forms have in common is the actual image of being. Being is independent and persistent. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have independent and persistent facilities. If being creates, then being must create by the act of knowing. If being creates by knowing, what every form and all existing forms have in common is the actual image of knowing. Knowing is criterial and descriptive. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have criterial and descriptive facilities. If knowing creates, then knowing must create by the act of example. If knowing creates by example, what every form and all existing forms have in common is the actual image of example. Example is perceptive and instructive. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have perceptive and instructive facilities. If example creates, then example must create by the act of event. If example creates by event, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of event. Event is practical and active. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have practical and active facilities. If event creates, then event must create by the act of causing. If event creates by causing, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of causing. Causing is dependent and circumstantial. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have dependent and circumstantial facilities. If causing creates, then causing must create by the act of forming and unforming. If causing creates by forming and unforming, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of forming and unforming. Forming and unforming is temporal and progressive. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have temporal and progressive facilities. If forming and unforming creates, then forming and unforming must create by the act of alternative. If forming and unforming creates by alternative, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of alternative. Alternative is optional and various. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have optional and various facilities. If alternative creates, then alternative must create by the act of choice. If alternative creates by choice, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of choice. Choice is decisive and authoritative. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have decisive and authoritative facilities. If choice creates, then choice must create by the act of order. If choice creates by order, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of order. Order is fitting and relevant. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have fitting and relevant facilities. If order creates, then order must create by the act of reflection. If order creates by reflection, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of reflection. Reflection is visual and expressive. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have visual and expressive facilities. If reflection creates, then reflection must create by the act of formation. If reflection creates by formation, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of formation. Formation is proportional and positional. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have proportional and positional facilities. If formation creates, then formation must create by the act of information. If formation creates by information, what every form and all existing forms have in common, is the actual image of information. Information is interchangeable and precise. Therefore, one form and every existing form must have interchangeable and precise facilities. If information creates, then information must create by the act of origin. If information creates by origin, What every form and all existing forms have in common is the actual image of origin. If true, then origin and information must exist as the actual image of perfect combination. If origin and information exist as perfect combination, then creation must include the actual image of being, independent and persistent, criterial and descriptive, perceptive and instructive, practical and active, circumstantial and dependent, temporal and progressive, optional and various, decisive and authoritative, fitting and relevant, visual and expressive, proportional and positional, interchangeable and precise. If God exists, then God must exist as the actual image of perfect being. If perfect being exists, then perfect being must exist as the actual image of perfect reason. If perfect reason exists, then perfect reason must exist as the actual image of perfect form, image, and function, act, comparison. If perfect form and function comparison exists, then perfect form and function comparison must exist as the actual image of perfect infinite, and neutral comparison. If perfect infinite, and neutral comparison exists, then perfect infinite, and neutral comparison must exist as the actual image of perfect interchangeable balance. If perfect interchangeable balance exists, then perfect interchangeable balance must exist, as infinite in form, and neutral in function, and neutral in form, and infinite in function. If perfect interchangeable balance exists, then perfect interchangeable balance must exist within itself as the actual image of perfect resistance. If perfect resistance exists, then perfect resistance must exist as the actual image of perfect act. If perfect act exists, then perfect act must exist as the actual image of perfect God. If perfect God exists, then perfect God must exist as the actual image of perfect state. If perfect state exists, then perfect state must exist as the actual image of perfect intensity. If perfect intensity exists, then perfect intensity must exist as the actual image of perfect intention. If perfect intention exists, then perfect intention must exist as the actual image of perfect attention. If perfect attention exists, then perfect attention must exist as the actual image of perfect mind. If perfect mind exists, then perfect mind must also exist as the actual image of human mind. Can I see God? First, I see the image of seeing, neutral and infinite. Then, I see the image of stillness, time and space. Within stillness, I see the image of direction and distance. Immersed in the distance and direction, I see the image of natural symmetry. Surrounded by natural symmetry, I see the image of visual understanding. Applying visual understanding, I see the image of form and motion. Internal and external to form and motion, I see the image of object and myself. What I see, everyone can see. Every time we're looking at, we see God, before that. When I look at my human form, I see the image of myself. Looking at an object, I see the image of something other than myself. I see the image of the object and myself from an external position. I see the image of myself and the object from an internal application. I see the image of myself and the object from an internal position. I see the image of the object and myself from an external application. I see the image of myself towards an internal center. I see the image of the object towards an infinite space. I see the image of myself towards an infinite space. I see the image of the object towards an internal center. When I see the image of the internal center, infinite space consists of it. When I see the image of the infinite space, internal center dissolves in it. When I look at it, I see the image of no further. Further is the same. If further opens, I see neutral symmetry revealing the sound image, physical difference, prior to it being named, and the natural understanding of observation and image. Independent and persistent, criterial and descriptive, perceptive and instructive, practical and active, circumstantial and dependent, temporal and progressive, optional and various, decisive and authoritative, fitting and relevant, visual and expressive, proportional and positional, interchangeable and precise. While reflecting the positional image and the mathematical act of information and experience, application and word, entity and language, structure and knowledge, number and example, function and criteria, set and event, reason and purpose, concept and necessity, conscious proportion and being, I and God. The gift of God. An instant liberation for all is possible if we are to visualize every word as personal experience, and all subjects of knowledge as common human entity. At the same instant, the I factor enters a standalone out-of-body dimension, unattached to the human experience carried in any word. Free of the image carried in every word, the I factor becomes an observer of all, and an equivalent part of the God factor, able to observe from above and within each word as per the visual understanding of what every word stands for. At this level, the human body stands as biological mechanism individually interconnected to the inner and outer environments, while the I factor appears as the observer of the natural image of every available intent and content expressed in a word, the order of word placement in the combined human world of knowledge, and the comparison of the detailed personal expression of each experience that defines every subject of knowledge. Adjusted and readjusted to a final fit, constantly filtered through the human mechanism of being, every personal expression of experience traditionalized in language, individually practiced, and socially formalized in a common subject of identity, harmoniously matches in principle every process as per pre-existing bodily example of its intent and content. However, expressed through a different combination of sound, All languages contain complementary elements and interchangeable subjects of knowledge detailing a common environmental image of the pre-existing, perceived, and accepted, linguistics, and the human expressional structure, mathematics. Holding the experienced contribution of all human generations, the memorial storage containing the combined descriptions of knowledge including all its subjects, resembles the manual collection of intellectual human parts, activating within each contact a personal or social identity. Considering a unifying attempt from this point, we all project a personal interpretation of knowledge, and the order of social acceptance to match. Considering that every perceived difference is elevated to human attention from its pre-existing environment and intentionally evaluated as per human order of acceptance, all subjects of knowledge carry on the environmental resemblance of the human form. Therefore, the given principal model of unity for every individual and social entity residing in the permanence of humankind. At this instant, a personal orienting mathematical coordinate, point of identity draw, is available to everyone, in one or more applications of any word combination, in one or more applications of any descriptive data combination, and in one or more applications of any subject presentation combination, totaling to one or more applications of all words descriptive data subject presentation combination. Considering that all human wording equal communicating of human experiences subdividing into language divisions, furthermore, subdividing into subject making of each language, description making of each subject, word making of each description, meaning making of each word, reason making of every meaning, system making of every reason, understanding making of every system, symmetry making of every understanding, identity making of every symmetry, self making of every identity, purpose making of every self, and God making of every purpose, the intellectual genealogy of human creation becomes absolutely necessary. The intellectual genealogy of human creation. Considering that the Creator predates the creation but not the connection, can simultaneously be and not be, divide and remain the same etc., the Creator or the connection to it equals zero. But to create and not be the creation, zero must also be something, able to act but remain constant, hence, zero the eternal becomes zero equals -1, +1, 0 the temporal, constantly forming and unforming, being and not being, dividing and uniting in the Creator's own reflection of the purpose, initial momentum, act, natural symmetry, and effect, proportional positioning. Considering the Creator's initial momentum, act, and effect to be instant, constant, and continuous, the creation then must be temporal, dimensional, and positional, therefore unilateral, active, and criterial, consisting of proportional instant, constant, and continuous, and the begin-ending creation of conscious experience, self, perceived perception, I, conscience feel, body, transforming as intentional intensity instant, me. Intellectual creation line. God knows God. Infinite neutral space, creates time, present dimension. God plus time creates distance, infinite awareness. Time plus distance creates direction, motion application. Distance plus direction creates symmetry, reflecting frequency. Direction plus symmetry creates eye consciousness, infinite, neutral application. Symmetry plus eye consciousness creates understanding, orientation, proportional positioning. Eye consciousness plus understanding creates reason, comparison, identity recognition. Understanding plus reason creates meaning, form, criterial difference. Reason plus meaning creates reality, visual, information conservation. Meaning plus reality creates word, sound, graphic structure. Reality plus word creates mind, informative, image exchange. Word plus mind creates conscience, body, function reflection. Mind plus conscience creates me, being, knowing doing. Equaling, the existential necessity to experience and describe an image or entireties in a word combination. Simultaneously generating. A personal human identity characterized as per-word image collected and released at the local co-cultural exchange subjects of knowledge. A specialized human identity characterized as per-word image collected and released at the humankind co-professional exchange subjects of knowledge. And a dimensional human identity characterized as per-word image collected and released at the universal co-conscious exchange subjects of knowledge. Transcending as the embodiment of all knowledge to the creation moment and considering human inability to know the end distance, therefore, internal-external boundaries of very own self, to the eye-instant experience of the human self-God and the reciprocal affinity. At this instant, the unified image of all the wording takes place in a pulsate perception of known, yet to be known multidimensional world, in the unison act of humankind awareness and the coordinated effort, realizing the humanity Christ form, arising from within the linguistic differences of every geographical culture, from within the unified core understanding of every faith, from within the intellectual perception of every science, from within the lingualized structure of every mathematical reasoning, from within the specialized activity of every social entity, from within the personal development of every single human being, and from within the common knowledge of every good experience, to the combined natural understanding, God status, and the universal position. Spoken experience appears to be recurring natural revelation relevant to human physical awareness, the multidimensional body behavioral system, and the biological order of social interactions. Spoken in the White Little Book experience, is presented as a natural elevation, where the complete state of mind can be observed. A natural enlightenment process is supported by re-experiencing the birth memory event, Kundalini momentum, the death feel, and introduction to the natural symmetry. Releasing everything known to achieve an empty natural self seems to be a necessity to complete any observation unattached to its contents. These observations involve viewing word imagery, as they become active to reflect their original context, while revealing their content within, as well as the place they take in the natural environment. Exchanging word imagery is how we construct and decide every human relationship. It has become obvious that parts of the experience described in the White Little Book, revealing the natural understanding of God appearance, God's freedom to appear at any time, communion, God's freedom to communicate to anyone, insight, I-conscious ability to visualize, out-of-body experience, flexibility to accept any universal position, psychological birth, I-instant thought travel through birth memory event, Kundalini, human electric awakening, death test, living body death experience, God acceptance, God consciousness human body alignment, sacred geometry, I-witnessing the natural symmetry state of being, human nature awareness, realizing every particle intentional formation dimension, natural understanding, recognizing natural being and personal traits, free will, human freedom to reject, enlightenment, visual orientation through every dimensional level, timeless knowledge, word reference for every experienced difference, life after life, experiential being, lingual identity, self-realization, human multi-dimensional borderless being, unification, human humanity Christ projection, hold very strong resemblance to some of the core teachings featured in different religions and institutions of knowledge found within intellectual, professional and communal cultures around the world. But these teachings are specific functions and components in a single God-human experience, representing successive development stages of a single human being, in a single lifetime span. Why aren't they introduced as such? Why parts of a single experience, useless on their own, with little social value and unachievable in any other possible way, would be separated, and symbolically marked held within different cultures away from one another, together with the expectance of an end-of-time special human return. Wondering if human life is subject to a natural repeat and realizing human social ability to preserve and release lasting verbal information, it appears that Nameless Ancient would have secretly migrated these parts away into different communities' cultural storage, as an experiment for us all. The Nameless Ancient would have thought that the person re-witnessing the ultimate human God experience would easily recognize the scattered parts ritually preserved as central teaching within the facets of their holding culture, and aware of his own experience, unify them as per natural interposition and their original order of acceptance, simultaneously providing all of us with a genuine proof that a cyclic repeat involving an identical part, or the complete human life, was possible. And if one human life is subject to a natural repeat, then every human life would be as well. Free of the bondage of death and belonging to all, the core religious teachings residing within the cultures all around the world would be peacefully assembled, and together with every part of the natural symmetry representing a visual understanding, whether religious in nature or otherwise, embedded in a language or its structure, in a writing or a building, obvious or undercover, would be intentionally presented to the combined judgment of humanity, as example of a single continuous human experience, relevant to the common nature and the complete mechanism of being. At first, he thought that all this was understandable and easily observed by any one of us, but when the opposite became obvious as well, the question, "What's the point of seeing something no one can?" appeared into the picture of reason. The answer was simply presented as, while the white little book experience forwards the natural understanding and visual image representing the general whole, individuality of each of us rises the knowledge and the visual image representing the detailed parts to fit. The detailed parts fitted the image of the general whole perfectly, except there was no war, occupation, exploitation, hostility, bullying, corruption, etc. But if all our social doings reflect the natural projection of the biological and physical mechanism of the human body, why war, occupation, exploitation, hostility, bullying, corruption, etc., aren't visible in the visual image representing the general whole? An eternal moment followed. Then everything clarified to perfection. It offered the detailed visual image achieved in all aspects of the human knowledge, involving the development of the biophysical mechanism of the human body, describing the before and after birth act. It is only after birth that the peaceful growth of the biological and physical mechanism of the human body was exposed to bacterial parasite warfare, occupation, exploitation, etc. As every piece of the accumulated knowledge is processed mentally by a single human being before becoming a social act or activity, the originality of the natural human mechanism of being at birth and proceeding offered itself as a referential living map to this process, and consequently provided a pre-existing example to any social involvement developing a peaceful growth, productive, sharing and caring intellectual environment and the corresponding facilities. While the bacterial influence at birth and proceeding, attaching to the human body the natural activity of the bacterial mechanism of being, altered this map, providing a parallel point of reference to the human mental process, and accordingly, replicated itself as pre-existing example for any social involvement engaged in occupation, manipulative support, malicious protection, and competing exploitation of those facilities. And that's why our social life experience was exposed to productive and parasite effort, involving peace, understanding and care, as well as hostility, exploitation and bullying of each other and the environment at the same time. And while searching within that seemingly chaotic bodily life for a match, We all activated and accepted part or the whole of our individual self, simultaneously setting a social behavior model for every personal experiential example. And while searching within, the realms of before-birth biophysical mechanism of being, we all activated and accepted part or the whole of our individual self, simultaneously setting a social intellectual behavior model for every human biological example. And while searching within, the serenity of the beginning moment and beyond, we all activated and accepted part or the whole of our individual self, simultaneously setting a social spiritual behavior model for every human physical example. The form and function of the natural mechanism of the human body rose from within through language to the social levels as personal and practical intuitive knowledge, reflective to the core structure and understanding of the corresponding act, activity, entity or culture, while all subjects of knowledge combined, completed the human body's social behavior matching model. At the same instant, he found himself entering the infinite space of the timeless time in a lifelike state. Everyone else was present. "I am here to thank you," he says, looking at the infinite space being replaced by the see-through mirror-like image of the natural symmetry. "We are all here." He sees the individual experience of every one of us interconnected into an all-institutional display of refined knowledge, reflecting the detailed common Christ formation accomplished by all of us in a combined effort. Within the natural formation of Christ, representing the exemplar of human internal-external form and function through every aspect of the combined understanding of personal, cultural, professional and institutional knowledge. All differences were parts of one difference, all people were parts of one person, all languages were parts of one language, all faiths were parts of one faith, all sciences were parts of one science, and all doings were parts of one doing. And this is how we all connect. In the beginning there was the Word. The Word is I. The silent voice of beyond shining throughout the natural symmetry permanently revealing within the infinite space. The unconceived body of Christ consisting of the proportional perception of pure distance, direction, dimension, motion, heat, function, purpose, span, and reason, prior to, and within the occurrence of any bodily formation, the absolute zero. And that's how we all unite. We all have a notion of God. In the dream, God appeared to be beyond the limit of any human commitment in the formless form of the absolute zero, a current to the natural symmetry. The natural symmetry, liberating the image captured in every word and language, while reconstructing the visual understanding of the nature, form, function and mechanism reflected in every act or activity a word or language represents, revealing that the human form of being provides the natural map of references, offering a pre-existing example to every personal and social human behavior. The pre-birth pristine development and after-birth bacterial-imposed alliance on the human organism stimulates its personal, productive and parasite behavior, rights, wrongs, social concepts and activities. The thinking process, searching at request the mechanism of human body microbiome in all its informative memory levels for matching examples, elevates the detected match as a linguistic concept or practical behavior, reflective to the corresponding entity, its principle, act, activity, or social interaction. All recorded information, intellectual and practical knowledge of humanity combined, provide the eternal life-afterlife chart of examples, where every human can match and revive a personal behavior model, expressing it through an individual combination of language, in an abstract display, social act or activity, simultaneously adding new contributions to the common chart of cycled and recycled human behavior. All languages overlapped and similarities reduced, reveal the overall understanding and the total capacity of a single common language, originating in the making of a single common human being model. Every subject of knowledge, however open to interpretational possibilities, remains permanently attached to its original establishment principle. The absolute zero connects the position of judgment to everything and everyone, in an instant 0 to 1 mathematical act of objectivity. Seeing God in everything is feeling I in everyone. Within God factor, the natural symmetry consisting of the instant, constant and continuous incorporate, providing the multidimensional relativity for everything possible and everyone involved in any form or course. The respective boundaries of all possible knowledge in a bodily replicate moment of creation. The image of all wording and its subjects as per the order of experience and the order of existence. While allowing the instant of the physical creation to appear as it does to the I factor. The I factor, recognizing each bodily experience, see, hear, speak, think, know, understand etc., relating to what, where, when, why, how etc., observed object or subject of knowledge, making the I factor an entity of its own, prior to any of the following activity within the inner and the outer form of the human body, therefore, the first and the last bodily experience. For an experience to be a difference, the I factor must remain unchanged, bearing 0 to 1 mathematical relativity to any recognized difference, and 0 to 0 comparison ability prior to recognizing a difference to itself or to another. Being a natural constant, the I factor cannot perish, but only be part of another bodily experience, while all activity achieved in the renewed lifespan amounting to personal experience, structurally contributing to the informative account of differences, we call human knowledge. Recorded within the human knowledge, the I factor remains attached to its name, whilst every lived experience becomes a recorded behavior. Introduced to the new generation through language, the recorded behavior becomes active part of another bodily experience, further detailing the exemplar of that behavior in a personal explanation. Depending on its content, every accomplished exemplar of human behavior will activate a positive or negative experience, visible in every form of society. Physically removing an active experience using force or persuasion cannot be successful, as both positive and negative behavior reside permanently as biological example, whether it involves the removed or the remover. Within the natural symmetry, every part of the human knowledge stands as per a human experienced entity, extracted from the complete exemplar model of all behavior, possible to be re-experienced and reassembled by anyone, partially or whole, and reactivated at any good or bad behavior precinct. The I factor stands as the natural ability to recognize all. Christ stands as the exemplar model, fitting all good human behavior. Beyond Christ, reflective to the original purpose of form, formation and information, stands God. Human quest. If the universe had a beginning, did it start from an orderly circumstance, or was its arrival expected by an external order? If mathematics was always part of the universe, can we call it a mathematical arrangement? If a human body is a combination of particles, atoms etc., can we visualize bodily activity at any of particle levels? If we can, will it be possible to observe, even by reason only, components of different physical, chemical, and biological combinations, organs, heartbeat, light, sound, gravity, motion, etc., as being interactive parts of a human being at the particle level? If we can visualize the human body at the particle level at any possible dimension, will it resemble the universe we experience? If one of us is identifying, estimating, or describing a universal aspect at the cosmological level, is there any chance that simultaneously, the same one is identifying, estimating, or describing a corresponding part of very own self at the particle level as well, providing all of us with the possible proof that the human body and the universe are comparable? If we are to visualize all species at the smallest particle level, will it be possible to observe, even by reason only, the individual progression of species through the mathematical balance of physics, precise combination of chemistry, functional mechanism of biology, all the way to the levels of eco-social interaction? If that is possible, will it be appropriate to say that human intellect is applicable to the natural progression of all species? Is human intellect an isolated incident in nature, or an attraction to the aspect of intelligibility available in the seen and unseen natural world? Can human being do anything else but see, hear, speak, and make another human, defining how we perceive the world, while excluding the other forms the world could possibly have? Do all construction, technique, and technology amount to the artificial human self-reproduction form that can endure all types of life? Can words be organized, and all together visualized? What is perfect unity? It starts with clear mental space. It continuous with neutral observation. It involves every single experience. It includes every word-image combination. It constitutes whole human knowledge. It formalizes every linguistic subject. It utilizes every criterial description. It identifies neutral connecting bonds. It adjusts with balanced acceptance. It transmits with precise instruction. It activates with functional repetition. It assembles and reassembles for better performance. It appreciates individual contribution. It mechanizes professional institution. It delivers through collective solution. It benefits everybody. Plea to humanity. The will of God has appeared in our midst, and because of that, all our doings have become visible. What has become visible is, all our social doings reflect the natural making of a human being, in a sense, that every personal behavior and subject of knowledge leading to a social act or activity equals a concept or a process existent within the body and the nature of a human being, possible to be traced, compared, and paralleled, as to provide a natural unifying model for all subjects of knowledge, and human materialized practices. Participation is guaranteed, as without a unifying model, all subjects of knowledge remain structurally disconnected and in partial practical use, therefore, vulnerable to interpretational degeneration, instructive manipulation, submissive control and volatile reformation. Expecting to realize the combined understanding of human knowledge, and the unifying status of natural individual and social behavior, the will of God, which in the world of reality is presented as the natural symmetry, and which, by considerable means seems to be the right way to see the unseen, is pleading humankind to consider the following. The inevitable. Calling the intellectual judgment of the humanity into a collective summit and involving the best of individual and institutional knowledge to present the mathematical understanding of personal, cultural and professional human behavior, to reveal the common social fabric. The essential. Establishing the linguistic identity, the overlapping span, and the generational flow for all personal and professional entities, cultures, and subcultures throughout the humanity to formalize their social effect. The necessity. Identifying productive parasite effort and support, before engaging the most harmless and useful personal and professional human behavior, into a suitable systematic monetary exchange. The purposeful. Assembling relevant electorates as per the professional ability of each entity, and systematically interconnecting the intellectual understanding and practical function through all cultures and human populations, in conformation with the local and global professional community to achieve maximum institutional expertise benefit. The demand. Elevating the best achieving individual human behavior into each of the governing positions to structure, energize and manage a harmless and resourceful social mechanism. The choice. Accepting or rejecting individual aggregate, the cycle of regeneration, and the original purpose or the alternative use of form, formation, and information dependent on independence. The unity. Applying neutral understanding to all aspects of knowledge to reveal individuality, commonality and the criterial order. All information and mechanisms required are existing intellectual areas present within the individual and institutional human knowledge, and once recognized, a social unity based on the synchronized understanding that all languages display objective and subjective fundamental similarities to one another, and we all reflect and stimulate comparable personal and practical human behavior. Design and construct at different levels of the same principle. Appreciate personal achievement to define human limit. Classify intellectual capacity for social benefit. Specialize society for individual credit. Faithfully accept a representation to rise a governing unit. Would be obvious and available to all. Throughout the human history, structural social changes have come because of ideas brought to life through physical struggle, leaving the professional intellectual capacity of a human being in the hands of the strongest to be used as political tool, rather that of an independent social entity and direct part-taker in the social management of a human being. If not inherited, forced, or corrupted, the way to government is decided by public electorates voting through to office, convincing public or political party members based on campaign-earned communal popularity, promising negotiating solutions to any community issues at local, national, and international level. As many of the critical issues at national level are influenced by historical disputes and malice events that support a socially dominant behavior, the negotiating solution becomes an increasingly challenging subject gripped in the dominance of its own historicity. Furthermore, due to national issues being simultaneously interrelated international issues, and consequently parts of the same historical disputes and malice events that support and protect a socially dominant entity, now at the international level, although presented with a specialized advice, any national or international governing body, directly or indirectly influenced by those underlying and usually unresolved issues, will find itself in a difficult conflicting of interest position, seriously reducing its own decision-making potency, alternatively resulting on opinionated governing activities, social isolations, and direct or indirect cause of human suffering. Naturally, the will of God invites all of us to come together and activate the end to that. We as people display similar intellectual and practical human behavior throughout all categories of every culture within humanity, have natural personal understanding and social knowledge, are interconnected global members founded on comparable professional entities, enterprises, industries, institutions etc., far beyond and within all intellectual areas and boundaries of knowledge. We elevate and fund specific governing positions able to estimate, coordinate, and regulate activities and interconnectivities of human practices, partly or in whole, in relation to one another, the natural environments, and the resources. We seek and faithfully trust the management of all governing positions and related regulations to the highest possible individual understanding, humanity has on offer, awarded by the appropriate human cultures and the professional level of institutional knowledge. This plea to humanity highlights an opportunity for all of us to identify the interrelated similarities and differences between all human cultures and subcultures, and mathematically install the refined institutional knowledge language every culture and subculture represents, into a peaceful exemplar of human behavior accessible to every human being, essential to any good governing activity, and achievable as per the following order. All types of social activity, the knowledge of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized, and the understanding of the corresponding languages and sublanguages individualized within humanity, identifying the cultural entity, institutional representation, establishment principle, and social liability. All types of personal behavior, observer, thinker, wise, just, believer, designer, planner, worker, warrior, negotiator, estimator, destructive, constructive, etc. The knowledge language of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized and presented as to establish natural human behavior model, whether characterized by a primitive description, or a current scholarly subject found with an ancient, or a modern culture. All types of professional activity, medicinal, artisan, technical, mechanical, architectural, agricultural, manufacturing, sporting, sexual, political, spiritual, religious, scientific, military etc., active in a product development or specific engagement including design, construction and operation of an object, building, machinery, vehicle, technique or technology, the knowledge language of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized, and attached to the corresponding human personal behavior, agricultural observer etc. Displayed to establish personal influence and social performance of each entity, agricultural enterprise etc., active in any population, culture, or within the intercultural level. All types of professional establishment, entity, enterprise, industry, organization etc. The knowledge language of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized, and their differences mathematically presented at the humankind level to establish compatible informative exchange, influential span, and service holdings they provide beneficiary to the personal, social and natural environments. All types of monetary exchange, note, point, barter, favor, donation, etc. The knowledge language of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized, and engaged to activate the systematic nature of professional activities, aiming to establish a traceable economic measuring unit, as well as the best form of currency which would be suitable to complete the intermediary transactions, while diminishing the chance of any exchange for social activities, traditional or in progress, that would cause or have a damaging impact on people, culture, structure, and environment. All types of social liability, age, health, depreciation, social distress, natural disaster etc., present or potential, the knowledge language of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized, and mathematically described to establish the accurate form, size, proportion, prevention, and professional relief. All types of incoming revenue, tax, interest, profit, fee, charge etc. The knowledge language of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized and mathematically evaluated before loaded into the monetary exchange system to establish their economic significance, and purposely achieve the liability-revenue balance, age tax, health interest, depreciation profit etc., through the professional entity, enterprise, industry etc. Handling of each situation, aggression-regression, destruction-construction, exploitation-production etc., needs and proceeds. All personal and collective practices regarding a social formation at the cultural or professional level, the understanding of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be recognized and mathematically visualized into a knowledge language presentation, accepting physical and intellectual existence of every person, realizing linguistic structure and relative subjects of knowledge in every culture, formalizing professional and interprofessional engagement of all practical and informative knowledge, subsequently, liberating the natural identity of every human being, elevating the significance of every cultural knowledge, and providing professional expertise and institutional level of understanding to all human aspects. All personal experiences and historical events socially valued and stored in a knowledge language or any other form of communication, identifying with an entity or cultural tradition, the understanding of which resides with an accomplished individual or institution are to be professionally preserved as to protect humankind collective memory and establish the exemplar model of human behavior at all time, ready for collection or recollection by any living human, while placing the unwanted tag at any recorded experience that will encourage behavioral repetition of a personal, social or environmental harmful example. All personal and collective knowledge language representing an individual experience or a combined social aggregate of human act or activity, the understanding of which resides with an accomplished individual or institutions are to be identified, and mathematically compared to the corresponding physical, chemical, and biological combinations found in the natural formation of the human mechanism of being, to establish the reciprocal biosocial behavior matching positions, the natural map of references and predictions for all human activities, and consequently, the ultimate understanding of the internal-external human existence. All personal and professional informative knowledge representing an internal or external environment, act or activity entering the combined understanding of humankind are to be identified and inter-institutionally cross-referenced prior to being formally lingualized, individualizing purpose, method of achievement, and physical completion simultaneously realizing the human-humankind awareness, and the coordinated individual-collective effort engaging in any of the local, global, or universal assignments. The will of God, wishing good luck to humankind, indicates that the human can achieve perfection, whether it's by liberating personal and specialized identity, designing a suitable habit or habitat, technique or technology, or simply, just be. The truth is existent in everyone's body, where internal and external touch, and when example and event exchange, whether that involves the exchange of a social event reflecting a human bodily example, or the social example reflecting a universal bodily event. It all fits together to perfection, and everyone is part of it. Thank you.